just sleeping in the clothes. It's been so long now. The license is
I think in this passage it's not a good idea to keep the child here. Put the child on the floor, okay? Because the passage will be rather long.
yeah.
Can try this one.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, salt, right? Could be. No. Not yet. By the style.
No. Oh. But no, I know it.
In darkness, the tunnels, the passages, the chambers are very similar, so it's very easy to get lost in dark mines. So in the past, the miners named chambers and named passages, and it helped to find the way out. And that's why here you can see a board with the name of this chamber. It's Nicolaus Copernicus chamber. Nicolaus Copernicus was a Polish astronomer from the end of the 15th century, from the first half of the 16th century. Probably he was the first tourist here. He visited the mine when he was 20 years old. And here you can see 2 years, 1473 and 1973. He was born in 1473. And the salt figure, you can see here, was carved in 1973. It was the 500th anniversary of Copernicus' birth. The figure is made of salt. Probably you are surprised that it's not white in color, because at home we use white salt, but at home we use very small crystals of salt. If a lump of salt is bigger, salt is not white. Salt is like glass. It's translucent or even transparent. I have a lump of pure salt here, but there is dark here, so you cannot see that it's like glass. But if I use a lamp, you can see that it's like crystal. Very beautiful. And this lump of salt contains no impurities. It's pure salt. Also, this salt is translucent. Salt is always translucent. So using a lamp, we can check if something is made of salt. Of course, it would be possible to leak the salt, but we cannot leak Copernicus because it will disappear in a week if everybody leaked. Also, the floor is made of salt. It's possible to leak, but I don't recommend leak the floor. But using a lamp, we can see that also the floor is made of salt. And salt sometimes contains more, sometimes less impurities. If you have a mobile phone, you cannot use it for calling from here, but you can use it for taking pictures and use a lamp in your mobile phone. On the walls, on the floor, put your lamp very close to the salt, and you will see that salt is always translucent. And let's go this way.
First tourist.
How old is the salt in Wieliczka? The salt deposit was found about 13.5 million years ago from a sea. There was large sea covering this part of Europe, and after a hot, dry, and for a very long period, seawater evaporated, leaving here a huge salt deposit. But then there were tectonic motions during the creation of Carpathian Mountains, and the layers of salt were crushed and moved, and blocks were created. And if we enter a chamber, we enter a block of salt, but it's empty inside. It's not a natural cave. We don't have natural caves here. Everything we are visiting was excavated by the miners. It's incredible, but they use only hand tools cutting salt from the walls. So they excavated the internal part of the block of salt. They couldn't excavate the entire block of salt because you can imagine that it would collapse. So they had to leave something. They had to leave a layer of salt. That's why we have salt everywhere. But this part was excavated by the miners. On the walls, you can see very beautiful patterns. You can see layers of salt, which settled here a long time ago. And you can see that sometimes salt was very pure. Sometimes it was mixed with sand. And the patterns were created during the tectonic motions. So this is the effect of tectonic motions. For a long time, people didn't know about the rock salt. They discovered the rock salt only in the 13th century. So let's go to see some figures illustrating beautiful legend related to the discovery of rock salt. For a long time, people didn't know that they had something valuable underground. They discovered the rock salt in the 13th century during the reign of Princess Kinga. Kinga was a Hungarian princess, or daughter of Hungarian King Bela IV. And according to one of the most beautiful legends related to Wieliczka, salt was brought to Poland by Kinga. And here you can see 6 figures illustrating the legend, and we have a short presentation of this legend. So let's listen to the story of Kinga.
When a Polish prince called Bolesław proposed to Hungarian Princess Kinga, her father, King Bela, insisted on a traditional dowry. But Kinga came up with another idea. She knew that no rock salt was mined in Poland, and decided to ask her father for a group of salt miners. She wished to find salt in Poland with their help. Without a second thought, the king presented to Kinga an entire salt mine in Hungary. The princess visited the mine on her way to Krakow. She came near the mine shaft and, surprisingly, threw her engagement ring into it. When she arrived in her new country, she requested the mine.
Chapel you will see on the second level is dedicated to Saint Kinga. As I said, the rock salt is translucent but without lump, is gray in color. So on the right you can see salt found here millions of years ago, but on the left you can see fresh salt. Fresh salt is the effect of secondary crystallization of salt. You can see that there are something like cauliflowers, and the miners called this type of salt cauliflowers. They are from water. Next to leaks of water, next to pipes with water, cauliflowers were created. So it's secondary crystallization. You can see that salt is white because the crystals are very small, but in the lower part is rusty because of corrosion. Metal corrodes very fast in salt, and that's why also the salts change the color. And let's go in that direction, please. Only a presentation. empty space can be very dangerous. Because in every underground empty space, there is a risk of collapse, in theory. Another danger in the mines was fire. You can see a lot of wood here. In the past, they used to open fire lead. So they had a lot of fires here. And another danger in salt mines is water. Underground water. Very dark. So we have to pump water immediately. And another danger in the mines is methane gas. Methane methane is lighter than the air, so it accumulates under the single chambers. It has no color, no odor, so they can see, they can feel the methane gas. But methane gas is very dangerous because it creates a very explosive mixture with the air. When the concentration in the air is between 5 and 15%, when there is more or less methane gas burns. And the miners trying to eliminate methane gas from the chambers, from the passages, using very interesting but very dangerous method. They tried to burn off the methane gas. So they crawled on the floor and they were holding lightning torches. So they tried to eliminate methane gas using open fire. It was so dangerous work that only experienced older miners could perform this kind of work. Now come to this side because here we will have a short presentation of this method. So stay here on this side and do it.
Yeah.
On the right you can see a wall built of salt bricks. Very often salt containing a lot of sand, a lot of impurities was left in the mine. They didn't transport bad salt, but they cut bricks and instead of wooden structures, sometimes they build walls, salt walls, supporting the roof of chambers. Okay, keep that off please. The miners had two big challenges. One was to excavate salt, and the other was to transport salt to the shaft and then to the surface. And as you know, the basic form was a cylinder. So cylinders were transported to the surface, but there were also smaller pieces of salt. and they were crushed and packed into barrels and then transported to the shaft in the barrels. Also, horses worked in the mine. They transported salt in the passages, and they operated big machines, big devices transporting salt from the mine to the surface. Now we know that they used horses from the 15th century, but in the 15th century horses worked outside. They operated some devices situated outside. From the 16th century, horses worked also underground. Imagine to transport a horse to the mine. We have no inclined passages, we have only vertical shafts. So everything was transported through the shafts, also the horses. The miners in the shafts used ladders. Barrels were transported by ropes, and also horses were transported like barrels by the long ropes. So you can imagine that it took hours to transport a horse. It was very stressful for a horse to be transported to the mine and for people to transport the animals. That's why horses couldn't be transported every day to the mine and from the mine. And horses were accommodated underground. They transported horses to the mine and they lived here. They lived here for 5-6 years, not days, not months, but for years. After years of work, horses were transported to the surface. We don't know the exact number of horses working here. We know that in the 18th century, about 50 horses worked here at the same moment. We had horses even after the Second World War. After the Second World War, we had 4 horses working in the mine. Now we have no animals. All the horses were transported to the surface. And in the next chamber, on the left, you will see an original device operated by the horses in the 18th century.
But yeah, how could I say it's not even when we go to Egypt we get scouts and we speak the same language. Once we always like you go to the touristy places, nothing will happen. But in Jordan, yes, nothing will happen otherwise. Like if you go to the streets, nobody will notice actually. Would you recommend to visit it?
Yeah.
This is a Hadi.
We are in Casimir the Great chamber. Casimir the Great was a Polish king from the 14th century, very important for the miners. He was very important because he proclaimed a statute for the Saltworks, a kind of a document regulating laws for miners, regulating trade and so on, which was very important because in the Middle Ages, salt was very expensive. It was so expensive that 1/3 of income of Poland came from here, from the mine. And over there you can see a bust of the king, and in this bigger chamber you can see an original device used for transport in the past, used for transport in the 18th century. You can see that it was operated by horses. There were some devices operated by 4 horses, some devices, bigger devices operated by 8 horses. And you can see that the device is composed of 2 parts. On the left, a big drum turned by the horses, and a long rope, and 2 wheels. The construction with 2 wheels on the right, that 2 wheels change the direction of the rope, and when the horses turned the drum, the rope moved, and of course one end of the rope went down and the other went up. So if the device was situated on the surface, they could transport something from the mine, and at the same moment they could transport something to the mine. For instance, the wood, which was used for building the wooden structures. Here we have a little model of this device. So from the left to see better and better the transport in the mine. You can see that the drum is turned by the horses, and in the shaft there is a rope. One end of the rope is going down and the other is coming up. So you can see a cylinder of salt transported from the mine to the surface and wood transported to the mine. And on the right we have two big cylinders of salt. Such devices were used until the 19th century in the Wieliczka salt mine. In the 19th century they were replaced with modern solutions, for instance steam engines. And we are going to the left from the chamber.
To jest to samo urządzenie, które jest tu przed nami, tylko ono jest zamontowane w klecie, czyli w budynku na nadszybiu. Takie urządzenia działały też na budynku kultury. I ono wygląda.
Yeah, 20 minutes.
They produced stone tools and they produced salt, but they didn't know about the rock salt underground. They produced salt using water. There were some sources with salty water in the surroundings of Wieliczka, so they evaporated salty water, obtaining salt. And then they learned that they could preserve food using salt. And they looked for more water in order to produce more salt. And they built wells. A well is a kind of vertical passage, a kind of shaft. For a long time, they couldn't find the rock salt because they didn't know about the rock salt. But in the 13th century, deepening a well, they found the first crystals of salt. By accident, so rock salt was discovered here by accident. And from the 13th century until 1996, with no break, the rock salt was excavated in this salt mine. From 1996, we don't excavate the rock salt. We have no extraction of rock, but we have production. We produce salt using similar method. We produce salt from water. We evaporate water, of course, not on a fireplace, in a garden, we have modern devices, but the method is actually the same. And from here, we are going to the left.
But you've seen it probably back beach. It's really famous.
Yeah, probably. People like what's familiar. No? Because it's the same weather or something like that. But how's the weather in Israel? It's cold.
Well,
It's not cold, it's cold. Once or twice a year. Snow.
So that we are in a high chamber connecting to levels of the mine. Now we are visiting the first level. In a moment we are going to the second level of the mine. So we will have about 150 steps here. This chamber is very irregular. Looks like a natural cave. But as I mentioned, we have no natural caves here. Everything was excavated by the miners. And in high chambers, sometimes they use hand crosses. So they devise the same type of device you saw in the first chamber, operated by 4 miners, and over there you can see 2 earths and a rope. There is a barrel attached to one end of the rope and wood attached to the other end of the rope. There were some places in the mine they couldn't use any devices, so the miners transported salt themselves. And in a moment we are going deeper. You will see some figures on the right illustrating the transport of salt on steps. And sometimes they use ladders in high chambers because there was no other possibility. Let's go to that. steps were using were built especially for you, for the visitors, not for the miners. The miners use ladders, or sometimes they carved salt steps. And if you turn, you will see relics of original steps from the 17th century. This chamber is from the 17th century, so probably also the steps are from the 17th century. And in high chambers, very often we have a lot of wooden structures supporting the roof. But here we don't have. Here we have another method. You can see everywhere long bolts. They are roof bolts. Roof bolts are long screws. They are loaded to the rock mass. They are about 8-9 meters long screws, and they stabilize the rock mass without building additional wooden structures. You can see two types of the roof bolts. Here you can see a metal bolt. They were used in the end of the 20th century. It wasn't a good idea because of corrosion. So that's why now they are made of artificial material, which is a better solution. They go through the layer of salt, through the 2 meters of salt, and as I mentioned, they stabilize. They protect the high chambers from collapse. We have a part of the mine which not be used in the future, and some chambers are during liquidation. So some chambers will be filled with backfilling, with sandwich, with salty water, but they are not, of course, not the chambers on the tourist route, but they are dangerous for the city. So chambers which are not very beautiful, which are not a part of the tourist route in the future will disappear. Okay, so let's go deeper. On the right you can see 3 figures of quartz. They were carved in the beginning of the 20th century by one of our miners.
I stay within sometimes because I see everybody but yes, it's nice to sit down something over time.
Water is the biggest problem of the mine. Water, underground water is not safe, and we have a lot of leaks of water every minute. About 400 liters of water come to the mine, and we pump water immediately. But in the past, they couldn't pump water immediately from the leaks. So they built special drainage system of pipes, system of containers, of barrels, and water was collected in the mine. It was transported down to the bottom of the shaft, and it was collected there. And from there, it was transported to the surface. They used special huge leather bags, wooden buckets in order to transport salt from the mine to the surface. From the 16th century, they tried to use some simple pumps. And here you can see an example of a pump. It's only a reconstruction. The pump was operated by 2 people, 2 miners. And on the right, you can see another natural passage of the mine with broken wooden structures. Of course, we cannot visit that part of the mine, so we are going this way. We are 90 meters down from the surface. This is the second level of the mine.
I'm just not sure what they're going to do. Smoke, did you remember? No. Sorry. Jak go straciłam, widzę.
The moment it will be light here, but I'm waiting for the full group. There were a lot of strange stories in the mine, a lot of legends, traditions, superstitions, and they believe that there were some creatures living here, helping in the mining duties, or sometimes warning before some dangers. And here you can see 8 creatures, 8 dwarfs, not 7 but 8. But you can see that only 7 dwarfs are working. 7 dwarfs on the right. 1 on the left is doing nothing. He's smiling only. Have you got any idea why? No? Project manager? Supervisor? Or some people say that he's a tourist guy smiling. The dwarves were carved only after the Second World War by one of the miners, especially for children visiting the tourism. And now we are going to see 2 chapels. The miners are very, very religious. They prayed a lot, and they built underground chapels. We know about 20 chapels, but it's possible that there were more chapels, because sometimes we have only a description of an old chapel. Sometimes we have relics of chapels, traces of crosses, of figures, and on the tourist route we have only 3 chapels. The chapels were built next to the exits, so next to the shafts, next to dangerous places. Very often, if there was any dangerous place, they put a picture with Virgin Mary, a cross or something else brought from their houses. Sometimes they carved salt figures and decorated their chapels. Very often the chapels were built on underground crossings of the roads. This is Holy Cross Chapel. You can see 2 wooden figures from the 17th century and 2 salt figures from the 19th century. And you can compare the condition of wooden and salt figures. Salt figures are very destroyed, very obliterated because of humidity. Now you can feel that the air is rather dry, because we have special device maintaining dry air on the tourist route, which is very important here, because the next chamber is St. Kinga's Chapel, the most beautiful place of the tourist route. I think the place you saw in a lot of pictures before coming here. Salt. Yes, of course, and it's decorated with salt.
To ja może zejdę do kościoła. No na skąd? Dobrze, tam będzie. No będziemy się kierować w każdym razie na Merącza, no więc jakby ktoś mi odebrał, to było super. Dobrze, no to w takim razie umówmy się, może żeby nie komplikować, to ja dojdę do Daniłowicza i tam je wydam. Okej, no dobra, dzięki. Proszę, mamy problem. Okay, you can leave, but the lift will be waiting on the normal part. So we need to go. No daj mi sekundę, dobra? Okay, we are in front of the So let's take right side situated steps to reach the church. From the church, we are going by one on the staircase toward the elevator, and he allowed me to arrange you from the road.
mamy w Austrii. Obyśmy daleko nie zaszli.
No tam od razu się objawia taka strona schodach, wiesz, tam w środku, jak wchodzimy do tego pierwszego przedziału, tam z tymi drzwiami.
A faktycznie.
Ewentualnie na schodach.
Pierwszy kontakt.
Ktoś jakoś przetrwa i pierwszy tam kontakt. Na schodach natychmiast my już nikt nie dojdzie tutaj dotąd.
Okay, now closer please. You can see that the King's Chapel is very beautiful. It's actually a church, underground church, situated 101 meters far from the surface, and still active church. Every Sunday there is a mass celebrated here. There are masses also during some Catholic holidays, some holidays of miners, and their chapel was established in the 19th century in an empty chamber left after a huge block of salt. So first it was a block of salt. The miners excavated salt from here. On the right you can see traces after the big blocks of salt cut from the walls. And when they established that chapel, the chapel was decorated by 3 miners, but they didn't work together. Let's go deeper. And in the bottom I will explain you the meaning of the bas-reliefs. I will say you something about the miners creating the pictures. Okay, so let's go. Sorry. About 2 minutes of break to take pictures to have look. Okay, as I said, the decorations were created by 3 people, 3 miners. The first one was he worked here in the 19th century and in the beginning of the 20th century, and first he created the main altar. In the main altar you can see 3 figures. The most important is in the middle part, Kinga, Princess Kinga from the legend. He became saint and she is the patron of salt miners. The same miner created the cross on the left and the pulpit on the right, and then in the beginning of the 20th century, 2 side altars and 2 side chapels. You can see Resurrection Chapel. Started carving the scene of the Nativity, but unfortunately there was an accident in the mine. He fell down from a few meters and died because of the accident, and his younger brother continued the work. His brother created 2 bas-reliefs here, sentence of Herod on the massacre of the innocents. And come close. 1927, also the second miner died, but he died with no accident, and the mine looked for another person, another miner he could continue. And they found Anton. Here you can see his name and the year, 1927, and he continued. He worked here from 1927, and he continued the work. And he created another scene from the New Testament, Flight to Egypt. The next one is 12 years old Jesus preaching in the temple. On that wall you can see Wieliczka, now the Last Supper, and Doubting Thomas. Of course the Last Supper is the most popular because it was modeled on the fresco of Leonardo da Vinci. But you have to imagine that the miner who created it never saw the fresco because he was a simple worker of the mine, simple miner, and he was never abroad. somebody, probably one of the engineers, brought a picture, and in the picture there was the last summer. According to the picture, the miner created the barrel, which seems to be very deep, but it's only 16 centimeters deep. Of course, also the floor is made of salt, but there are no tiles put here, but it's block of salt, and the pattern is cut with simple tools, and of course the chandeliers are decorated by the crystals of salt. So you can see that salt has no color here, so it's like crystal-like glass. I promised to give you right here.
You were here first time?
Yes.
You know back one.
Made of salt. They are produced not here, not in Wieliczka. They are from Kłodawa, from another Polish salt mine. Kłodawa is the biggest Polish salt mine in the middle part of Poland, and they produce salt for various purposes, for industry, for melting ice, to winter on the roads, and they produce special cubes. They are produced for animals. Animals love licking salt, so they produce cubes of pressed salt. They are very hard, so they are produced. Animals can lick salt. Of course, the black stains are not the natural features of salt. They are chewing gums caused by veterans here. But you saw the same on the steps. A lot of black stains. You can see the bottom of this chamber is filled with water, so it's a kind of lake, a barrage lake, 9 meters deep on the left side of the chamber. And the water is fully saturated water containing 32% of salt. So if you evaporated 1 cubic meter of this water, you will get more than 300 kilograms of pure salt. And as I mentioned, from 1996, we produce salt using water. We don't excavate rock salt in Wieliczka. And every year we produce about 15,000 tons of salt. We produce 15,000 tons of salt a year. It's not too much. In the past we produced more. In the 80s, in the beginning of the 90s, we produced about 247,000 tons of salt a year. So now we produce nothing. Why? Because now it's rather utilization of salty water. We produce salt because we are forced to do it, because we have to pump water from the mine, and we cannot let the water to the environment. It's very harmful for the plants. So we have to utilize salt. We have to desalinate salty water. And that's why we produce salt. Salt is a kind of byproduct. So you can buy in the supermarket byproduct from Wieliczka. And another Polish salt mines, they still excavate the rock. Salt. But here we utilize salty water. As I mentioned, it's fully saturated salty water, so it's impossible to swim in the water. The water is very cold, about 11 Celsius centigrade, so don't try to swim here to jump to the water. And let's go deeper. Second, they had to rebuild it because they planned the jump of second using a wheelchair or something not to walk the elevator to in Russia. So they rebuilt it very fast. The doctors were afraid that they might become impossible to see the mine.
They can't afford you, that's for sure.
You can see little bits all over the place, can't you? Do you see when we came out of the chapel, there was jump on the second passage?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought, well, that's a short way to get in.
It depends on the number of the groups. Sometimes one, sometimes two, sometimes three, sometimes four. But it's very seldom. 1 or 2. You can see the differences between the chambers of the first level and of the second level. Here the chambers are bigger because here the blocks of salt were bigger. The size, the shape of the chambers depended on size and shape of blocks of salt. And here we have completely high chambers because here they found almost vertical blocks of salt. This is a chamber from the 18th century. They excavated salt from the upper part to the bottom, always. And it took about 50 years to excavate a chamber like this in the 18th century. And first this chamber was empty with no wooden structures because it was strong enough. So they included this chamber to the tourist route in the 19th century, building the first steps. And the tourists used this chamber for a few years, and after a few years they decided to close this chamber and to build additional wooden structure supporting the roof. And then they reopened the chamber, but after a few years they decided to close it and to rebuild the wooden structure because it didn't support the roof properly. And they repeated this operation several times, opening and closing the chamber. For a long time it was closed. They reopened in 2010. But now, not only the wooden structure supports the roof, you can see white points everywhere. They are places of the roof bolts. They are the same bolts you have seen in the previous chambers, but here they are not visible because they are covered with concrete, but they stabilize the chamber, not the wooden structure. And as I mentioned here, we have a complex of high chambers, so let's go to see another one. Unfortunately, it's not for us. Wow. It's not the end of our tour, so come closer, please. Bapra's group, come closer to me. Jakaś pani zamknęła drzwi? Tak.
Coś krzyczała, że nie wchodzi z ruchu, bo jest zamknięcie chmury.
Okay, we are in another high chamber. Originally, this chamber was higher. This chamber was about 40 meters high, but it was too much, so they decided to fill the bottom of the chamber with backfilling. And they built a wooden floor, and then they built a very beautiful wooden structure. Having wooden floor, having beautiful white construction, they can organize some events here. And as you can see, also today we have some events. Unfortunately, the tables are not prepared for us, for our group. But we organize, sometimes we organize conferences, concerts, sport competitions, and the others, sometimes also private parties. Not only here, but not far from here there is a conference room, and that's why this chamber is one of the two chambers you can use your telephone for calling, not only for taking pictures. In a moment we will continue our route after the previous groups. We can have a short break here. If you need to go to the toilet just now, there is a possibility, but I think it's a big crowd in the toilet. The next toilet will be in about 20 minutes, because in 20 minutes we will finish together and you will have a longer break on the next level of the chamber. Okay, so have a short break here, and after the I think in about 3-4 minutes we will...
Meine Damen und Herren, die Gruppe aus Brandenburg bitte kommen Sie zum Ausgang. Wir gehen gleich weiter Richtung Weimar.